Yeah, the first time I met him was on a double date, and he was with the other girl. That's when I first saw him. But eventually, he came to work for my dad in the gravel business, driving truck for my dad. And he used to come around the house a bit, and we took a liking to each other, although he was older than I was, of course. He was 6 years older. And he had a Ford Coupe he was going to trade in. And he had some rattles and noises in it that he wanted to shim up if he could before he traded it in. And he come up to the house and was fussing away, cleaning this, and I was out helping him get this ready to trade this car in. So we started an acquaintance. Well, then he had asked me to go out a few times, so one night was particularly funny, we thought. He asked me to go to a strawberry social out by Highgate, and he was supposed to, the boys had been driving truck at night, not at night, but in the evening till dark, and he was supposed to drive. But he said to my dad, he said, "I'd kind of like to go away tonight," he said. "I'm wondering if somebody could take my place for 2 or 3 hours." And my dad said, "Why, sure, boy, go on and go. I'll drive your truck. It's just a couple hours. I'll drive your truck for you. I'll take the loads." So we were just going out of the driveway, going to the social, and my dad's coming up from the river in the truck of gravel. His mouth just flew open. He saw us. He didn't know where Wilford was going or who he was going with. But anyway, then I went to work in Chatham about a year, less than a year later. And he kept coming to see me in Chatham. We went together 3 years before we were married. Well, the one of her fire, she was married in 1909, and sometime late that fall or in the spring, her parents' house caught on fire. They lived upstairs in a 2-story place. They lived upstairs, and they called them to come to the fire. They got the call up home that the house was on fire. So it was in the night. Dad got out of bed, went to grab his pants, tried to pull them up off the floor, and they wouldn't come, and he kept pulling, and my mother's hollering at him, "Not those, Edgar, not those, because those are nailed to the floor." He thought she was absolutely out of her mind, you know. But she and her girlfriend had been up there that day, and she'd been complaining how he just dropped these pants, work pants, and left them right there. And they apparently didn't have much regard for the floor, so they said, "How about we just nail them to the floor?" So that was the day they did it. That night, the house caught fire. Well, there's one I remember that, and this wasn't to do with my youth. I think this was after I was married, probably. But anyway, the family was sitting around, and for some reason or other, my brother got sent upstairs to bring the alarm clock down. So he just hit the top of the stairs, ready to come down, and my dad called out to him, "Wind it a little on the way down." That brought a great guffaw of laughter, and you know, no time could be wasted, you see, so wind it. So that saying, I hear it periodically in the family to this day, if it fits the occasion. Wind it a little. Everybody knows what it means. You and your family lived not far from my dad, and there were 4 boys, and consequently, they spent a lot of time down at his place. One night, one of them, I think should remain nameless, was down playing and played a little too long, and it began to get dark, or at least twilight, and he had to go home. So he said, well, he had a little bit apprehensive maybe about going up the road, but his grandpa said to him, "You run along," he said. "I'm sitting right here on the porch, and if you get home okay, you flash that front light. And if you don't make it, flash it twice." "Goodbye, Grandpa." "Okay, I'll do that." Well, as far as stories from my mother's day, she had lots of stories too, but I don't know whether I recall any right now. She told how her brothers always collected walnuts in the fall, and hulled them, and then they had a rack on a shed roof, and they had boards to stop them, and they'd spread them all out on that shed roof, and they would dry, and they'd have them all winter long. Well, they didn't have as many squirrels as we've got today, I think, or they wouldn't have had those. But those were things people did in those days, and then all winter long you could crack walnuts. My uncle, Mother's sister's husband, Matt Ruckle, built this lovely home on the edge of town about 1910. And I spent a lot of time there with my cousins. And he had fox pens out the back. He raised silver foxes. He was a druggist, you know, but he raised silver foxes as a hobby. And he also had an animal called a fisher, which is a small rat-like thing. So we kids used to go back and look at the foxes, and we weren't supposed to be around them much because they weren't to be frightened or anything like that. But I stuck my finger through the wires one day and got bit by this fisher. Nipped. I had to go and have a shot for it. Always exploring, you see. Yeah. Well, of course, we followed the events leading up to it, the Chamberlain going and offering to make peace and all this, and hoping it would happen. And of course it didn't happen. We lived where Jerry lives, and we were sleeping on the sleeping porch at the back with the windows open. And this Sunday morning we awakened to a radio just blaring. And we got up to check, and it was Joe Jones across the road, had his radio. He was up early, we were sleeping in. He had his radio on loud that the war had been declared. So then, you know, eventually you got into a way of life where you went on. I guess people were starting to enlist, and Mother spent many years as president of the Red Cross. I don't know but what she had it most of the time, and worked hard. They all worked hard. So I remember because I was married then, of course, and I remember the things we did to try and make money, and the knitting. No, everybody had a scarf on the go, or if they couldn't knit socks, they could knit a scarf, and you didn't go to get your hair done or anything without having your knitting with you. You didn't waste any time. Everybody worked at it. Before that, we used to have community bridge parties, and that stopped immediately. It took no time for that. So it made a change in the life, you know, in a way. You just go ahead, you do the best you can in the situation you find yourself in at the time. I don't know that there's any plan. Hopefully you're taught some good things to start with, and they sort of stick with you, and you automatically follow those. And it breaks my heart today when I see the way people throw that away. You know, they say this one saying is that God gave us memory so we can have roses in December. And I think of that so often. I think that's because when I'm reminiscing over all the things, that's your memory.